Our next three Hall of Fame honorees were there at the birth of the Off-Broadway movement in the Village in the 50s and 60s. Although unimpressed, Anne Meara recalled when she was asked about those times, but we thought that when the Village was really happening was in the 20s, when F. Scott Fitzgerald was there before our time. She said, people never know what's going on while it's happening. Do you think during the Renaissance people called it the Renaissance? No, evidently not. That was Anne Meara. Nevertheless, she appeared with her husband Jerry Stiller in early productions of Joe Papp's New York Shakespeare Festival, went on to success in television and film, but remained dedicated to Off-Broadway both as an actress, notably as Bunny Flingus in the premiere of The House of Blue Leaves, The Nurse in Romeo and Juliet, and as a playwright with her comedy dramas Afterplay and Down the Garden Paths. And at the same time, back in those days, Anne Jackson and Eli Wallach were there at the beginning. They were also brought together off-Broadway in the production of Tennessee Williams' This Property is Condemned. They married. It was a showmance. They married in 1948, going on to appear in 7 off-Broadway productions together, including their twin Obie turns in Marie Schischkel's one acts The Typist and the Tiger, and memorable appearances in Waltz of the Toreadors, The Diary of Anne Frank, and Café Crown. And Anne Meara, Anne Jackson, and Eli Wallach were still working off-Broadway in 2000 when Eli and Anne appeared as a show business couple in Anne Meara's second play, Down the Garden Paths. We're honored today to have the director of Down the Garden Paths and Afterplay here today to speak about these three remarkable artists and their careers. Currently the artistic director of George Street Playhouse and the director of this season's off-Broadway production of Clever Little Lies. Please welcome David Saint.
Hi, I'm so honored to speak about these three extraordinary individuals. First, Anne Meara, who became a sort of surrogate mother along with Jerry Stiller, a surrogate father to me after my parents died. And I met Anne when I was directing a play starring Jerry and their daughter, Amy. And I was intimidated. I went up to her. She came to see the play, and I went up to her and said, hello, Anne, I'm David Saint. And she said, cut the 2 intermissions. No play needs 3 acts. Hi, I'm Anne. Well, that's sort of Anne's style, you know, and it became very familiar not only to me but to the world as such a beloved figure. Flash forward, she sent me a play called, her first play called Afterplay. I read it, I loved it. I called her, she said, I want you to direct it. I said, I'd be thrilled. She took it to Manhattan Theater Club where they wanted to produce it. And they called us in and said, they called Anne and I in together and said, listen, we want to do the play, but we think it should be a different director, a director who has much more experience. And this was, 25 years ago. And Anne said, okay, no David, no play. And that was it. And that's very rare in our community, for someone to have so much loyalty to take a chance on somebody who's an unknown. And so I directed it, and we had a great time. There was a bit of the metaphysical in the play. Anne she was very well read, and she had a great deal of interest in metaphysics. So she would go to the play. She also was a woman of the people, so she'd go up Manhattan Theater Club to the audience and say, it's 90 minutes, so pee now, and she'd use an obscene gesture, as she always did. And then after the play, people would come up to her and just talk about the play and say things like, I had a weird feeling about where they were and what was happening. And she said, because they're dead. They're dead. You get it? They're dead. And that was Anne, just right at it. Later on, she wrote her second play, Down the Garden Paths, which was again metaphysical, had 3 different versions of the same story happening in one night. And she asked her dear friends, Eli Wallach and Anne Jackson, to do it. And also we cast Amy. It was actually my idea. I said, there are 2 daughters in the play. Why don't we cast your 2 daughters? So we cast Amy Stiller and Roberta Wallach in the play. And that play had a long journey. We started at George Street and we moved on. And that was very important to her too, the world of metaphysics. But I have to say, for me, so much of Anne was her generosity and her compassion. And, you know, Anne and Jerry would take me out to dinner all the time. And every single time the check came, I went for my wallet. And Anne would, I'd say, please, let me pay something. And Anne would say, shut the fuck up, put it away. This is the deal. We have money, you don't. You're young, we're not. When you get older and you have money, you have to pick up the check for the young artists at the table. And I think it's a great rule. And I've tried to live up to it. But also, Anne, you know, could say anything she wanted. And she had a way about her that never offended anyone. And my favorite example of this was I was lucky enough out at George Street to be working with Arthur Lawrence and Stephen Sondheim on redoing this show of theirs, Do I Hear a Waltz? And Anne Meara came to an early preview, and the four of us went out for dinner, and all of a sudden the chef came out and said, excuse me, I don't want to interrupt you, but Ms. Meara, I have to say hello because you and your husband gave me such pleasure, my wife and I, watching you on Ed Sullivan all the years. And she said, oh, lovely to meet you, you know. And she said, do you know these other people? And he said, well, I know David because he's from next door. And she said, do you know the wonderful Arthur Lawrence? And he said, you know, I met you last year when you were here doing a play. And she said, and what about the great Stephen Sondheim? And the chef said, well, to be honest, I didn't know who you were. But somebody in the kitchen told me you wrote that great Frank Sinatra song, Send in the Clowns. Silence. And it's the only time I saw Arthur Lawrence afraid. And Steve, just everybody, and Anne typically saved the day. She picked up her martini, and she held it up, and she said, you see, Steve, you crossed the Hudson, you don't mean shit. And Steve and Arthur burst out laughing, and Arthur said, you know, that he was forever grateful to Anne for once again saving the day in the inimitable Anne Meara fashion. So here to accept the award are Anne and Jerry's two wonderful and talented kids, Amy Stiller and Ben Stiller.
That is like the best thing you could say. Are we saying anything? I don't know. But no, it's true. I have such great memories of Anne, and it's like little things like, you know, sitting in bed, watching TV with her when we'd inevitably come across some inappropriate cable porn, which we'd linger on for 2 seconds too long, after which she'd say, I don't want to watch two guys washing each other's asses under a waterfall. But the only reason I'm saying that is because she was, but she couldn't offend, right? It's not even offensive because she was real, and she was irreverent, she had a great heart, and I mean, there was no bunny like Anne's bunny in House of Blue Leaves, if any of you saw it. You know, I think David said everything, just passionate, generous.
I think Merle said everything.
Oh, Merle. Merle was amazing. So, I mean, I don't know how to top what David said.
I would just say that probably if my mom was here, she would say, where the fuck were you when I was alive? But the reality is the Off Broadway community was always there for her, and she was always a part of it. And it looms very large in both our lives as just an incredible talent and mother. And I know I speak for our dad, Jerry, who couldn't be here. He's on a J date. He's moving on. But he's picking up the pieces. No. But, you know, she is, you know, she's killing from the grave, right? She's killing from the grave. So thank you very much. I know she'd be incredibly proud of this. Thank you.